This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
The temple in Jerusalem was not the only temple used by the Israelites. That's right. As Matthew Vander Els explains, mixing with surrounding pagan nations progressed to the point that Judah began dedicating copycat temples to the worship of not only YeHoVaH, but a second deity the people referred to as God's wife. Because it's the end of the sixth day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live. Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. It's Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. Now, you know you've gone off the spiritual rails when you decide that God needs a wife and start worshiping her too. The sad thing is, we're not talking about a polytheistic nation here. We're talking about the Israelites. Yes, the Israelites. Matthew Vander Els shows us how the tribe of Judah thought it was a good idea to create a copycat temple, well, copycat temples, many of them, and worship both YeHoVaH and Asherah, whom they determined to be his wife. Crazy. Before we get into that, we are on the fourth Shabbat of the second month and have just crossed over into the 35th day of the Omer on the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. And now let's focus our attention on my co-host, Angie Clark. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom, Scott.
Shabbat Shalom. Speaking of focusing on the calendar, it is the last weekend in ER. And you told me something interesting before the cameras came on that I did not know about the tribes and the months. Tell us about that.
Each tribe is associated with a month. And it just so happens that ER, the month of ER, is Issachar. That's the tribe that's focused in this month. And what their main instruction is to know the times and the seasons of YeHoVaH. And it just so happened that Yeshua was walking in that season, teaching, okay, this is the instruction. This is the season. He was training up his people once again before he ascended.
And God doesn't do anything by accident.
No.
I think that's what we miss when we're sitting in a pew and just sort of glazing over things. But then when people like Michael Rood dives into this, or Matthew Vander Els, or whomever, we begin to see, or even John Snyder, who wrote the Rightly Divided book that this month's Love Gift is focused on. You don't get the book, by the way, you get the teaching. But anyway, unless those people dive in, we don't realize these things that, if you think about it though, every Christian should realize that, okay, Passover, Yeshua died on Passover. That means something.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Shavuot, the Holy Spirit was given because it's the anniversary of Mount Sinai. Hello. Right? And so it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Because we have to put ourselves in the place of the people of that day. They obviously knew that, this month, Issachar, and what Issachar, obviously their job was. And Yeshua is sort of saying, hey guys, this is what this is all about.
Right.
I'm teaching you, for this month.
It was a season of transition. They were going from death, burial, and resurrection to Holy Spirit fire,
Right.
So Yeshua, I believe in the 40 days that he was walking the earth after his resurrection, that he was training them on what was coming. He didn't say what, he just said a helper. He really didn't go into a lot of detail. So they were anticipating this moment, I believe.
Yeah, and I think we talked about last week where Shavuot, they had to know something was coming.
Yeah, but he was instructing them and training them because it was the season to do so.
Speaking of seasons of teaching, so Michael Rood has had a wonderful career of teaching, and he still comes on with us every once in a while. There's just no room on the set here today. That's why he's not here today. And he needed the break after, he was really busy lately.
Right.
Grandkids coming over and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we gave him a break. But Michael has really done a wonderful thing here, especially since, now that, he's made wonderful strides since his stroke several years ago. And, if you see him up here, he's doing really great. But he has opened up his platform.
Not too many people do that. And, we just wanted to give Michael a shout out and say thank you, Michael, for doing this.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of teachers that have come up, out of the ashes, so to speak, because they've been given a platform at A Rood Awakening.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Michael, you can tell YeHoVaH has really been speaking to Michael's heart about that, because things that previously maybe he was like, no, this is our message and that's it.
Right.
Things that even go against what he originally taught. Now, the good example of that is Nehemiah with the name of God. if you look at Michael's old teachings, it's all Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahweh.
Right.
And then Nehemiah goes, wait a minute, it's YeHoVaH. And Michael goes, oh, you're right.
Yeah, he's still teachable in his 70s.
Exactly, yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And
It
so
is.
even things about like the Nephilim that Michael was absolutely staunch on about, we've had folks on this stage saying other things.
Right.
And we have passed it by Michael. And he said, not only do I want you to put extra promotion behind this.
Right.
Because he thought it was that important that we have other views. And it's okay. We should be used to that, right? Because we all walked away from where we were sitting in a church pew because we discovered something new.
Right.
So now that we're here, do we think we have it all?
Oh, Lord, no.
Like, come on, right? Like, we have to be moldable, we have to be malleable
Yes.
to accept new things. And Michael's a good example of that. So yes,
Absolutely.
shout out to Michael. Be
Shout
like
out to Michael.
There are other ways to look at things because do we know everything? No. When something new teaching comes along, rightly divide it, as John Snyder would say. But then if it makes sense, okay, we were wrong. It makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, good. I'm glad we've had this talking.
Me too. about like YeHoVaH needing a wife.
Well, right? Okay.
Delving into that.
Speaking of which, so Matthew Vander Els explains how the tribe of Judah began dedicating copycat temples. Yes, they actually built other temples to the worship of not only YeHoVaH, but a second deity. There were 2 places in these temples, for God and for God's wife. What? We'll get into that right after this. Here's the Kiddish with Michael.
When Yeshua fed the 5,000 with leavened barley loaves in the Galilee, the Pharisees came down on him because they accused him that he and his disciples did not wash their hands before they ate bread. They did not wash their hands with a negelvesser and say this prayer, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments, commanding us concerning the washing of hands." Why didn't Yeshua do that? Why didn't his disciples follow that? Because it is takanot. It is a law which they invented, and Moses said no one is ever allowed to add to or subtract from. But the night of the Last Supper, Yeshua took bread and he put in place a rehearsal that was really put in place by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek himself brought forth bread and wine to Abraham. And Yeshua interpreted that very thing. Baruch atah YeHoVaH Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem mi'aretz. This is what Yeshua put in place, that before we eat bread, that we say this prayer. And as often as we do this, we do it in remembrance of him because his broken body was broken for us, and by his stripes we were healed. So as often as we do this, as often we do it in remembrance of him. And Yeshua took the cup and he said, Baruch atah YeHoVaH Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Pri Hagafen. The creator of the fruit of the vine, YeHoVaH, created the fruit of the vine. He said, this represents the renewed covenant in my blood. As often as you do this, remember me. And remember, I will be drinking this with you at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Shabbat Shalom.
Perhaps you've heard that Jesus, Yeshua, had a wife, and it was Mary Magdalene. Remember that old thing? Well, did you ever know that YeHoVaH, God the Father, had a wife as well? Well, one of the tribes of Israel seemed to think so. So here to tell us a little bit about that is Matthew Vander Els. Matthew, welcome back.
Oh, glad to be back, Scott. Thank you so much for allowing me back and to discuss one of my favorite topics, which is a topic we don't often talk about, and that's the fact that Judea, the southern kingdom of Israel, decided that they felt God needed a wife, and they gave him a wife, and they worshiped his wife as his consort in the temple or the temples before the time of Josiah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a part of history you don't normally hear.
No. So we see it in Scripture, and it's mentioned in Scripture. Asherah. You ever heard of Asherah or Asherah poles and so on and so forth? And we see this mention of Asherah here and there, and the Asherim or the Asherah poles and so on. And we just kind of keep going, okay, that was a god, that was just a goddess, a pagan, and it was. But Judah's history with Asherah was much more intimate, and we have the blessing of archaeologists who have discovered this type of evidence for us to see beyond the veil of Judah's idolatry. And so it's a super fascinating topic.
So how do we know that, okay, so Asherah, yes, a goddess, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So where do we get the concept, I guess maybe you'll get to this, is that YeHoVaH and Asherah were married, that they were both to be worshiped together? I mean, what?
Well, sure. During a time where Israel and Judah were, they had trouble picking a side. Which side? Are they going to stand with God, or are they not going to stand with God? And they went through a mixture of incorporating things that they learned from their neighbors, specifically the north starting first, and incorporating them with their worship. And so you also have, it's a very common thing in the surrounding neighbors, the other myths, the pagan myths, specifically in the Canaanite pantheon, where deities would have a consort or a wife, or sometimes 3 wives, multiple wives. And it was kind of a natural thing to see in the pagan world. And when Israel wanted to dabble in that and mix that together with their culture, it's only natural that we would see it pop up.
Wow.
So
how does this start? Take us through the journey here. I'm curious to see what this is all about.
Asherah, as we'll see, Asherah was ancient, she has her roots in ancient Canaanite myth, but she was a fertility goddess, if you will. She was the one who brought forth fertility and blessing, because that's what everyone thinks fertility goddess, and they think, what? Oh, sex goddess. And no, that wasn't the concept. Fertility was blessing. Anything that's a blessing comes from a fertility deity. So money, we would think money.
So
money.
Is she synonymous with Ishtar, or is no different thing?
No, totally different thing. Okay. So in Canaanite myth, you had Anat, Ishtar, or Ashtarte as Ishtar, and Asherah. So Asherah was the one, if you won a brand new car and had all this money, that's fertility. That's what it is.
I see, okay.
That's the blessing, the wealthy lifestyle, the abundance. Ishtar, for a long time, was said to be a type of fertility goddess, but she didn't even have kids, which is kind of like, if you're going to be a fertility goddess, you might want to have, right?
Have some fertility?
Yeah, have some fertility. We know from the Epic of Gilgamesh and other records, she's associated with sexual activity, but she wasn't a sex goddess. She was actually a goddess of war. So she was a fighter. She was a warrior, but she was also promiscuous. And so she had the reputation of course, sexual promiscuity. Promiscuity, thank you. And but mainly war. So think of Athena.
Okay.
If you will, that type. That's who Ishtar was. But no, Asherah was much higher on the totem pole, if you will, of the pantheon, and she was central to kind of the overall Near East. I mean, she was pretty much within every culture, including Israel's, and. During this time, the people of Judah had become so confused about who their God was, and they began to have this distorted vision of their God, if you will, that Yahweh or YeHoVaH now needs to be worshipped alongside other gods. And one point, it seems, is that they took God and they conflated YeHoVaH with other gods, and that's how Judah wanted to see their God. They wanted to see their God the same way the nation saw theirs. Which is like, why? You're stepping down at that point. You're going down in how you're praising God. But this is Judah, and they have Jerusalem, they have the temple there. The Temple of Solomon is built, the central shrine to their God. They have the priesthood, but how could this happen? To better understand what happens, we're gonna have to take a look at Israel's history. But something we've discovered through biblical archaeology is Judah didn't just keep that one temple. They built many temples like the one in Jerusalem with the same type of layout. And there's several that we've discovered, and we know that several more exist. We'll talk about the one at Tel Arad here in a few minutes. That was destroyed/hidden during the time of Hezekiah. But they also discovered one, I believe, a few miles from the Temple Mount. There's like another Judean shrine to God, like the other temple. And so they were going crazy. They popping up temples here, temples there. And that's why it's so significant when Josiah came in and said, you know what, we are done with this mess. That's why he's such a righteous king. He said, you know what, everybody will come back to Jerusalem, destroy these other temples, destroy the shrines, get the Asherim out. And he was the one that centralized worship back in Jerusalem once again. That's why he's esteemed as the great king of Judah. But first, we have to understand the history of Israel. And we know that Israel had finally made it. They had gathered in the land, and all 12 tribes had finally come together and were unified under a monarchy that only lasted for 3 kings. Didn't really work so well. You had King Solomon, King David, and King Saul. But they were unified. And King Solomon, as we discussed last week, he brought Israel to their high point of worldly power, worldly reputation, and then the kingdom split in half, right? They had a civil dispute, so you had the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And I have a map here. Here's one of the maps. Let's see here. So the northern kingdom is referred to as the kingdom of Israel. The southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah. These are the 2 different kingdoms. And northern kingdom is also referred to as the kingdom of Ephraim. The southern kingdom, Judea or Judah. It's more of a desert area. It's very dry. It's not overwhelming with vegetation, but they had Jerusalem. It was kind of like a decent draw. They had Jerusalem and they had like the desert land. The northern tribes had the lush, beautiful area of Israel. This is where you have all of the produce coming in, all of the fields, the wheat, everything that's growing is growing in abundance in northern Israel. The fruit, lots of vegetation. The vineyards, none of that's going to grow very well in southern Israel.
Which is what Ephraim means anyway, is fruit.
There you go, exactly. And so you have northern Israel here, and they have an abundance of product. Now, in the real world, what type of opportunities does this open up for you if you are now managing a piece of land and it is producing a bunch of good stuff? Well, you have business opportunity, you have trade opportunity in the ancient world. And so they were smart. They started trading with their neighbors, and you had, goodness, the Ammonites, you have the Edomites, you have the Philistines all along the coast, which we know, it's so funny. We have, again, archaeology. What an amazing thing. We've discovered that the Philistines and the Israelites really they hung out with each other. Like we have this perception, and of course the stories in the Bible are written to frame out the Philistines were the enemies, and King David conquered them and slaughtered them and everything. But in the real world, war doesn't necessarily work that way across the board as far as the people go, you know? These are 2 cultures. One is occupying another, and apart from their governments, they're hanging out, right? And so the reason why we know that is we found pig bones up in some of the Israelite areas, and we found some pottery down in the Philistine areas that was Hebrew in nature. And so the conclusion is, and a lot more research that's been put into it, I just thought it was interesting, is that, you know, they know the Israelites didn't eat the pig. Why are there pig bones up here? And why is there Hebrew pottery in the place of the enemy? Because they hung out. Philistines would come up, numping on their pork chop or whatever, I don't know. You know, it's just, hey, what's up, guys? Throw them down. And then we have the more basic Hebrew pottery down with the Philistine stuff. It's like, oh, at the end of the day, people are just people.
Well, see, because when you go to a dinner party, you bring a bottle of wine, which in that would have been pottery here, full of wine. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Who knows? Lots of potsherds that can be traced back to Israel.
Where are you going tonight? We're going to the Philistines' house.
Yeah, we want to hang out with the Philistines.
The Apostle Paul was thoroughly impressed by the believers in a Macedonian city known as Berea because they were diligent in their examination of the Scriptures. But what does it mean to be like the Bereans?
If they searched the Scriptures daily, then the answer's somewhere in the Scriptures. So there has to be a directive that comes from the Scriptures. And sure enough, it's in the Torah.
In this month's Love Gift teaching, Rightly Dividing the Truth, author John Snyder presents an easy-to-follow procedure to test everything against the Torah in order to rightly divide the truth. This teaching is not for sale, and it's not available anywhere online. Instead, we'd like to give you this teaching as a thank you gift for donating to A Rood Awakening International. When you donate $50 as a love gift in May, you'll get Rightly Dividing the Truth with John Snyder on DVD, Blu-ray, or streaming on the michaelrood.tv app. Donate $100 and you'll get Rightly Dividing the Truth, plus a pair of genuine lambskin leather bookmarks, handmade by North Carolina artisan Ken Cowart, featuring the 2 sticks of Israel from Ezekiel 37. Donate $300 and you'll get Rightly Dividing the Truth, the lambskin leather bookmarks, and a custom embroidered shofar bag, suitable for shofars up to 38 inches tall. Also handmade by North Carolina artisan Ken Cowart. These gifts are a limited time offer from Michael Rood to thank you for your support. Make your donation today and receive the $50 gift, the $100 gift, or the $300 gift. Thank you. When you donate to receive the love gift, you ensure that these teachings keep coming from A Rood Awakening International. Use your smartphone to scan the QR code on your screen to donate now and receive these limited time gifts. Or call 888-766-3610 or get your gifts online with a donation at monthlylovegift.com.
And so we have all these kingdoms, and the northern kingdom, of course, occupied the Galilee area, Samaria, northern territory of Dan, and these were the most fertile areas in Israel. And the Phoenicians were the ones that occupied the northern coastline, and they were the ones that were really had the reputation of being the mariners, the traders, the manufacturers of goods, experts in shipbuilding, glass making, pottery, artwork. I mean, this was the civilized culture of the world with the Philistines. They were experts in making art from ivory. And here they are, like right next to northern Israel. And so what do you think is going to happen? Well, northern Israel sets their eyes to build their empire up and with their closest neighbors. And so the inevitable business relationship happens. And how do all good business relationships occur in the ancient world, Scott? I do. You get married, right? Mm-hmm. Get married. And so what we have is we have a new alliance between the Phoenicians and the northern tribes of Israel, or the northern kingdom of Israel, through the marriage of their king, King Ahab, to a Phoenician princess named Jezebel.
Aha,
right?
We know that name.
She is one of my favorite characters in the Bible, and probably not for a great reason. The story of Jezebel is interesting because Jezebel was likely forced into a marriage that she didn't want to be in. She's used as a political pawn. She's been objectified as a political pawn to be sent into Israel. And she brings with her organized religion of their main deities, which is Baal, or Baal-Hadad formerly, and Asherah. Baal was an ancient storm deity, so he calls down thunder and rain. Why is thunder and rain so important? Because it makes the crops grow, which they turn into cash. And then, of course, Asherah is the goddess of cash, or fertility and abundance and blessing, right? So these are the rich people's gods, if you will. And she brings that organized religion to this country where she has no idea of the culture, she has no idea of the religion, nothing. And so, yeah, I think we give Jezebel a lot of slack. She was just trying to make Israel great again, bringing in what she knew how to do. Anyway, pagan gods and such, all the same. And then throw out of her window. But I'm being a little sarcastic.
Sure.
But that's Jezebel, and that's what took place. That's what Jezebel came to Israel. And we know the story. She's this queen that brought this organized religion of all these false gods, and she ends up going to war with all of the prophets of God, right? She starts killing them off because she's establishing her nation's religion in an organized way for what she's used to. She's monopolizing the religion of Israel. And this is the stage. All this going on in the background is the stage where Elijah is introduced to us as the prophet of God. He stands against Ahab, he stands against Jezebel, and he stands against the worship of Baal and Asherah. And so what does Elijah do? Well, he instigates a prophet versus prophet face-off. I mean, what else do you do, right? David and Goliath, let's just come together, come on. And this takes place in 1 Kings chapter 18. It says, "Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table." So Elijah's calling, hey, listen, get 850, all these prophets to come up, and we're gonna settle this like prophets. I don't know. And so verse 20, "And Ahab sent word throughout all of Israel. He assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel, and Elijah went before the people and said, 'How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him.' And the people said nothing." People said nothing. Elijah's speaking to the people and he's calling them out. He's like, you are doing this mixture thing. You're doing this thing where you mix the religion of God only when it benefits you, and then you mix it with this pagan beliefs, and it's sheer idolatry. It's the same thing that Isaiah calls Judah out on. In Isaiah chapter 1, he's saying, you guys are worthless. You keep Shabbat, you offer sacrifices in the temple, you say your prayers, and it makes God want to vomit. Because you're doing all these things in the name of following God, but at the end of the day, you're just like everyone else. You are not pursuing justice and righteousness. The weakest in your towns are left to starve, and you're only using the faith and religion to benefit yourself. And so that's what Elijah's asking. He's asking, how long will you be on the fence? Which side are you going to land on? Pick a side.
Yep.
Of course, the people don't respond. And Elijah goes on to take 2 bulls, and the prophets of Baal choose one, and then he chooses the other. And the deal is that they're going to cut the cow up, and they're going to place it on the altars with wood. And then they're going to cry out to their gods, and they're going to see which god sends fire down, right? I mean, that seems like a totally legitimate type of, I don't know, seems like a good plan. And for Elijah, he takes 12 stones for the construction of the altar, 12 stones meaning the 12 tribes of Israel, and he makes reference to Jacob's name becoming Israel, and he told the people to pour 12 jars of water over the stones. Again, the entire altar represents Israel symbolically. It's a calling back for the people to remember who they are, to remember what side of the fence they belong on. And I love how he just dumps water all over the altar. You know, it's a taunt, if you will. Hey, make it wet, you know? Like he's trying to handicap God, right? Which, you remember in the video games, you could always set your handicap up. I don't know if that's a phrase that's still used, but yeah, Elijah's trying to handicap God for the display of it all.
It's like, not only are we going to get out of these handcuffs, we're going to put ourselves in a tank of water in the handcuffs.
Yeah.
And we're still going to get out.
Tie a chain around it. Yeah. You know, he's trying to handicap God because he knows God can't be handicapped, you know. Let's have God fight with one hand tied behind his back. I don't know. So the competition starts and the prophets of Baal cry out, but there's no answer. Surprise, right? They get knives, they slash themselves up. They're crying out, please, Baal, help us. And no matter what they do, Baal is nowhere to be seen. And so then it's Elijah's turn to step up to the plate. And Elijah prays to be vindicated as the prophet of God and that the power of God will be seen by all. And then Elijah ends his request with, answer me, God, right? Just blunt, just do this. The fire of the Lord fell out of heaven. It burns up the sacrifice. It burns up the wood, the stones, and the soil. Like it's all gone. And it licked up all of the water in the trench around it. And here's what it says in 1 Kings 18. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are the God of Israel. And so, huge story, huge implications, but the point was always to prove to the people who God was, the God they had forgotten, not the prophets of Baal, but that God was alive and was the only supreme God. It was the people that Elijah wanted to show the power of God to. And so Elijah and the people who are now on the side of God, what do they do next? They've won the competition, so they get all of the prophets of Baal and they take them down, our favorite scene, they take them down to the Kishon River, or the River Kishon, and that's where they slaughter all of the prophets of Baal.
So hold on to that thought. We're going to come back to this in just a second and see this photo of this amazing river that you saw in Israel. So you hang on as well. Thank you for being here. Your donations made this possible. Your donations now ensure that others can see this into the future. Thank you for doing it. We'll be right back. Hey, Torah fans, I just want to take a minute on behalf of everyone here at A Rood Awakening to say thank you. Because without you, nothing happens. No Shabbat Night Live, no MichaelRood.tv app, no social media updates, no new videos on YouTube or Rumble. Without you, no one would see anything from Michael Rood or any of the other guest teachers we have on our programs. There's no corporate safety net with a pile of money in case there's not enough. There's no government grant that keeps things going. And we don't ask companies outside this ministry to pay for commercials. In fact, some have offered and we have declined because that's not the way Yeshua did it. Yeshua's ministry needed donations from his followers. Several times in the Gospels, we see that Yeshua asked the disciples to buy something. Without money, how would they do that? They all left their jobs to follow him. And not to mention, the disciples even had Judas to keep track of the money. We don't like asking you to donate. That's uncomfortable for anyone, but we do want to thank you for doing it. You are the reason for every Rood Awakening. Thank you. Hey, thanks for supporting Shabbat Night Live. This is where you learn about the prophets of Baal and where we learned that after they were, embarrassed.
Yes.
Up on the mountain, they were taken down to the valley, and this is where they're going to meet their demise. And you've been there.
Yes.
So I'm sure this is like a really impressive sight. And
absolutely.
You have some photos of this.
You can still see the river today.
Oh, really?
The prophets of Baal and everything. Yeah, so here is a picture of me, or a picture that I took standing on top of Mount Carmel.
Okay.
And this shows the river in the distance there. You see it there? That's the one. That's the mighty river that all the prophets of Baal were taken for their demise.
I'm assuming it was a lot bigger back then.
We like to think so. So ever since the state of Israel, there have been massive construction projects to make the resources of the entire country more efficient. And so they take the water from the underground and they pump it other places. So it made the river shrink. But I always get a kick out of that when you go there. It's like that itty bitty, funny. You got to zoom in. But yeah, that's it. So if this is the traditional place on Mount Carmel that's in Israel, we got the church and everything. It's a long walk. Can you imagine just walking down? Okay, guys, let's go. I don't know.
People are like, where's the river? It's almost like it's still a river? Or is it almost looks like a pond at this point?
Yeah, right? It's just this itty bitty thing.
Oh, God.
And so that's a nice ending, right? Like that's the end of it. Like Elijah, all of the worship of other gods is now purged out of Israel, right? But it wasn't. It wasn't, because people are people. And let's be honest,
it's hard to extinguish an idea.
That's a really very good way of putting it. Israel continues worshiping other gods, but not just Israel is involved in such idolatry. Judah also becomes wrapped up in it, despite them having the priesthood and the temple in Jerusalem. Now this was Israel, and again, idolatry found its way south into Judah. And Hezekiah was one of the kings of Judah that attempted a type of reform with tearing down high places, tearing down the pagan altars, and trying to turn the worship of God back to God, because it was a problem. You know, like I said, there's a temple in Jerusalem, but there's been temples we've discovered all over the place. They put them up like candy. It was just wherever they wanted to.
Almost like putting up churches instead of just like mini temple, like these were to be representations of the larger one?
These were the same design. I mean, they had outer area, inner area, and they had a holiest of holies.
Oh, wow. So not even miniature versions, but just
they weren't
full on.
Itty bitty by any means.
Wow.
I mean, these are stout temple structures. And so one of the temples that we have found is on a hill or a tell known as Tel Arad. It's in south of Jerusalem, and it's eastward of Beersheba, if you will, or Abraham's town. We've excavated it, and it's one of the stops that we stop out in the tour. It's really cool. But we found this temple, and this Judahite temple, and here's a picture of it. Or this is a picture of the holiest of holies inside this temple. And it was a cultic place of worship, and it was excavated in the 1960s. But here we have this is the holiest of holies, and you'll see in there these two stones at the back, these two stelae at the back represent two different deities. Now remember, this is a temple that's devoted to the worship of Yahweh, or YeHoVaH, the God of Israel. Why are there two stones? And look, there's two incense altars. There's a bigger one and a smaller one. but there were two deities being worshipped and represented and had offerings going to in the holiest of holies in these temples in the time of Judah. And the consensus is one was for God and one was for his consort or his wife, Asherah. If you ever have been to the Israel Museum, a great Israel, filled with a lot of archaeological stuff, this is a recreation of the temple that's in the Israel Museum to kind of show it off and what it looked like. And so, yeah, you have some really wild idolatry going on in Judah during the time of Hezekiah and pre-Josiah.
Now, not to mention, you showed me this a little bit before the cameras came on, and you said that there was some interesting stuff found in that in one of those altars.
Yeah. So we found the temple in Tel Arad was preserved. So it's dated around the time of Hezekiah. The Bible says Hezekiah destroyed all the temples and everything. This one was buried intentionally. So I don't know if it was Hezekiah or whatnot, but it was around the time when the Assyrians were coming in, and they likely wanted to preserve the temple. If the Assyrians overtook Judah, and it would be years before they could kind of repopulate it. So they laid everything down on its side as not to damage it, and they buried it with dirt. So they could come back and dig it back up and it could be operational again. And so with these incense altars, apparently there was some mildew or resin found on one of them, and they did some samples, and God's lettuce came back as part of the incense that was offered on these. A little bit of cannabis was in there.
Wow.
Traces of it.
Okay.
I don't know the implications. That's just what they discovered. So that wasn't found in Jerusalem. I don't think we have any evidence that was used. But in this temple, yeah, they were doing some wild stuff.
Apparently.
Doing some wild stuff there, which is neat. But yeah, this is where Judah decided that God needed a wife. And so they incorporated Asherah into worship here. Here is a funerary, a burial stone with the inscription on it, and it's from the pillar of a tomb at Corbet El Kom. And you see it has this handprint in it, which is kind of neat. You know, it's a weird handprint, but it has an inscription on it. And here's what the inscription reads. Again, this is biblical archaeology of Judea. It says, YeHoVaH the rich wrote it, blessed be YeHoVaH by Yahweh. For from his enemies, by his Asherah, he saved him. And then it has the carving of the hand. By Abiyahu, by his Asherah, by Asherah. So it's a cry for blessing, essentially, or gratitude for blessing toward God and his Asherah and his wife. So people were actively worshiping.
Wow.
God and his consort.
And these are Hebrew people.
Yeah, this is Judah. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And it's so weird to see the evidence. You know, we read about it in the Bible, right? We read about, they tore down the Asherah poles and yada, yada, yada.
Well, who was using those?
Yeah, we want to know what this is. And we see very clear evidence of the other side of idolatry and what that actually looked like. And it was so widespread. I mean, it's not just in the temples or the altars, it's on burial stones. So this was the norm. Like, who knows for how many generations? And the people likely didn't know any better. You know, when it's passed down and this is how we do religion over and over again, it is what it is, you know, this is it. Here is a fascinating piece. So here is fragments of a jar that was found. And we have it written again. The inscription on the top says Yahweh or YeHoVaH and his Asherah. And the consensus is that the guy there with the tail is supposed to be God, and the smaller figure behind him, maybe slightly more feminine, is his Asherah. And so not only are these on altars or burial stones or cultic items, it's on a clay vase.
It's like
decoration.
It's almost like having like a cross or a menorah in your house.
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Same equivalent.
It's that common.
Wow.
It's that common. And so, yeah, people probably had bumper stickers, T-shirts, you know. Who knows?
Put it on their coffee mugs.
Put it on the coffee mugs. Yeah, exactly. And this would be a cool coffee mug. But you can even see how they've tried to illustrate God and his wife here. And it's like, what in the world? They've given him a figure.
Well, which is against Torah in the first place.
Oh, it's 100%
do not
Torah.
picture God.
It's 100% Torah. But Torah is not a thing at this point. You know what I mean? Like that type of level of commitment and faith or allegiance to God is not really, they were not respecting the Torah in the least.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. And so this is the mixing that takes place in Israel. The mixing that Solomon incorporated to his kingdom, the mixing that Israel took hold of, the mixing that Elijah pleads with Israel. How much longer will you continue to waver between both sides?
So this picture, this perfect picture we have of Israel was always perfect, and we need to aspire to be like Israel.
Oh,
man, they've got a messy, ugly past.
Yeah, that's the point of the story of the Bible, is we have this people who were freed from slavery, redeemed by God. They have been taken and they now bear the name of God, and their mission is to continue the mission of Abraham, which is to bring blessing and unite all of humanity back together in the blessings of God. And Abraham was chosen for the rescue mission that would correct or bring everyone back to the garden. Like that's what Genesis 12 is. That's God's rescue mission. Through Abraham, I'm gonna do something that's going to fix everything somehow. And so yeah, that's Israel. They go out, they go into the land, and they never achieve that status. It's just a continuation of becoming more and more and more like the world until finally they go to Babylon, they return home from exile, and they're still slaves now. They went from being freed from slavery to enslaving other nations and becoming Egypt, and now they find themselves back being slaves even in their own land again. And that was their status. That's how the Old Testament ends. And the Jewish canon, it ends with Chronicles, which was written right after the exile, and it almost ends with a fragmented sentence of like, to be continued. That's how, this is the records and to be continued when we go out. It's the decree to go out and reestablish. Then it just ends. It's like, okay, what's next? In the Christian canon of the Old Testament, we like the prophecies that talk about Yeshua, so we end with the prophets, right? We end with Malachi. But again, we end with the prophecies that God is going to keep his promises, that he's actually going to bring about the king and his kingdom, and a new heart for the people to worship him and change the world.
I'll bet you did not know that being an Ambassador Club member gets you exclusive early access to tickets to in-person events here at a Rood Awakening headquarters. Not to mention special gifts, cards, other nice stuff. Why? Because Ambassador Club members are the ones who keep the lights on. The Ambassador Club is an automated donation program of $100 a month or more if you'd like to. So if you appreciate the consistency of everything a Rood Awakening offers, be a part of the consistency that makes it happen. Join the Ambassador Club.
This all continued as this big mess, if we're going by the story in the Bible, until like 2 Kings 20:22, when Josiah is introduced. And King Josiah, he's the one that finds a copy of the law in the temple, right? He finds this scroll, hey, what's this scroll? I don't know, we read it out loud, is this the law of God? We don't know exactly what that is. The opinion is that that's Deuteronomy.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
So it's the law that they've never seen before, found before, second law. And then Josiah goes to one of my favorite women of the Bible, the prophetess Huldah.
Not a very common character.
Not a common character, often overlooked. She's only described as having a few verses. She's the husband of this guy, she's the wife of this guy. During the first century, there was actually, right outside the temple complex, there was actually a little shrine. And I think it was the tomb of Huldah, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
it's an actual thing. So if you go to the Israel Museum and you see the big 3D model, you can see her tomb. It's right there near in Jerusalem. But yeah, she was a prophet of God. And so King Josiah went to her, a woman, and he submits herself to her authority. And he asks her, I got this scroll. Is it the word of God? Is it the law? And she says, yeah, yes it is. And you should treat it as such. And so in that regard, she was the first person to canonize scripture.
Okay.
Divinely inspired. Yeah, Huldah. And so the king submits to that authority. This is the law, and he implements it. And so he goes on kind of a rampage. He gets all of the idols out. He destroys all of the other temples. says that the Asherim that were in the temple, so she had a symbol that was likely something like a tree. She had a tree of life type of symbol too, apparently. And that was in there. He got that out. And and then he basically made it illegal. He's like, no, you cannot worship anywhere else. No more temples, none of this altar. No, you're going to come back to Jerusalem. And this is going to be the place that God has placed his name, that we're going to worship him. And so that's called Josiah's Reform. And it's a huge deal in the Bible, a huge turning point for Judah, and how they dealt with outside influences and such. And so, yeah, that's what they did. And it's just one of those things. And it's interesting because, when we get to the time of the New Testament with Yeshua, we're not dealing with idols anymore, right? We're not dealing with statues. We're not dealing with Asherah poles. But we're still dealing with a mixture that's going on. And that's something that he calls out. I mean, there may not have been Asherah poles in the temple anymore, no Baal associations, but what Yeshua did see going on disgusted him so much that he began destroying the structured mixed worship of God in the temple. And that's ultimately what got him killed. But like in Mark 11, here's what it says in Mark 11 of what Yeshua does, and he gets so upset. He says, on reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple courts and began driving out those who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables, money changers, everyone selling doves. And what's he say? He says, this is not written that my house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you've made it a den of robbers. And that's when the chief priests and the teachers of the law wanted to kill him. He's like, no, you're calling us out now.
Right.
The religious at the time had taken the faith of God and the intentions of God's call to his people to be a blessing to others, to be those who drive the light to all nations. The religious had taken these things and they'd mixed them with, the worship of what brings success to them. I guess you could say Baal and Asherah, mixed it with the influence of money, mixed it with their own self-righteousness, with their own power, their grasp for power, and they used it to exploit the people that were poor around them in the name of God.
Right.
And so you kind of have this twist. And when their false sense of righteousness is called out by Yeshua, that's when they begin to get upset with him. That's when this guy we need to kill him because he's threatening our structure of power here. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It can happen to anyone and we don't even realize it. To the people in Judah, they understood that they were trying to benefit themselves. It wasn't about submitting themselves to the ways of God. It wasn't about being loyal to that. It wasn't about actually being the kingdom of priests. It was about doing whatever they need to do to make their lives better. And they exploited the faith of God in order to do that. And at the same time make themselves feel righteous. They did it the same way in the first century, mixing of politics and religion, mixing of the ways of the world and religion, mixing of sin and religion and faith in God. And hate to say that we probably still fall into that trap today.
Well, we're warned of that in Revelation, aren't we?
Absolutely.
I will spew you out of my mouth because you are neither hot nor cold. And I used to really misunderstand that. I thought, lukewarm. Yeah, who wants lukewarm mouth? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But no, this is about mixing. This is that there is a hot, there is a cold.
Yeah.
And you've mixed them. And now it's disgusting.
That's exactly right. And so that's what that looks like. And the same thing happens. We were talking about Revelation. That's what we talked about Solomon having the 666 reference.
Right.
If that's a connection to Revelation, the mark of the beast. So we have the beast of the sea, which represents empire collectively, and we have this beast on the land who is a religious aspect who's calling people to worship the empire through religion. And that's where we get in trouble.
Those are the things we need to understand, those representations, like the beast of the sea. So the sea is typically the nations, right?
You could say that. That's one suggestion for sure.
So like I've often wondered if throw this mountain into the sea. And you think, that's a crazy thing, it will be done. Well, what does the mountain represent? Well, it represents the word of God. Bring the word of God to the people and it will be done. Well, that seems a lot more plausible now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that's the call for Revelation. Like, if you endure to the end, or if you conquer to the end, Nike, right?
Yeah.
Conquer, even unto death, do not mix your loyalty to God with the way of, at the time, the Roman Empire. Do not do the things that they tell you to do. And the Roman Empire had mixed religion in with their politics. So, when your patriotism to the Roman Empire was conflated with their own religion, and it was even kind of conflated with Christian religion, as John's writing to these churches and be like, most of y'all have messed up. You're mixing too much. And so, that's the calling.
So what do you think that mixing is? We only have a minute and a half left, but do you have any thoughts of what that mixing would mean today in modern, like North America, Western culture? What is that mixing? Is it again the pursuit of wealth and using the piousness of being a Christian to call it righteous? You think there's that same thing?
I think throughout the ages, starting with Constantine, Christianity became an imperial religion that was used to gain people's support to go out and conquer others. So it was used as a type of weapon for others. And I think the same thing happens today with other nations. Whenever you have a nation that tries to mix secular politics with the way of Yeshua, you're always going to get a mixture, you're always going to get a distortion. And so like Christian nationalism, I think is the biggest threat or the closest thing that we have to what Revelation is talking about in our generation. And that is the mixing of an empire that is built on pursuing wealth and war and security with the way of Yeshua. Because we can do all these things as long as we have Yeshua backing us.
Right.
Right.
Good point. But where are our primary, first of all, what's our primary goal? Who's our God?
Yes.
And what are we doing all of this in the name of?
Exactly. And that's what got Christians killed in the first few centuries before Constantine. It was their unwillingness to support the Roman Empire, and it was the unwillingness to call Caesar Lord.
Okay, good lesson to have.
Sure.
All right, Matthew, thank you for joining us. One more? Can we do one more?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's come back and do it. Okay, you come back too. See you next week on Shabbat Night Live. Until then, Shavua Tov. Shabbat Shalom.
Whenever and wherever you are watching this broadcast, it represents hundreds of man-hours of production and post-production, and then it goes out to the world in several different languages. Why is this possible? It's because people like you support this ministry. We do our best to get this out freely to the entire world. Freely you have received. Now, this is your opportunity to do as Yeshua said, and freely give.